Hello, everyone. So join me and my best friend, Anime Ghost Girl, as we speak about Trans Allegheny, our experiences in the history of this beautiful building. Hope you enjoy it. All right, guys. So, hi, I'm Vegas Paranormal, and I have Miss Anime Ghost Girl with me, and we're going to be talking about Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. But we're going to also get into the history and paranormal experiences. So, Miss Anime Ghost Girl, tell us what got you into the paranormal.
All right. So I've actually been into the paranormal for a very long time, since a very young age. Um, Even though at this time in my life, back when I was a child, I didn't realize this was actually a paranormal experience. But the house we lived in Norfolk, Virginia, in my bedroom only, I would always feel what felt like child's hands playing with the back of my head. And it it would always happen like at night, and but it never scared me at all whatsoever. It was almost more like a soothing kind of thing. So that was kind of really my first introduction to the paranormal. The second event that happened to me was when I was about 8 years old. My parents and I went to see my great grandmother in Beckley, West Virginia, and at that time, my great grandfather was had already passed, and I didn't know too much about him except for that he worked in a sawmill. That's what he did for a living, and unfortunately lost two of his fingers in a sawmill accident. So my parents, my grandmother, and the other people that were there had gone off to do something, and I'm sitting there playing in the living room. And there's like a little doorway between the kitchen and the living room, and I'm playing, and I look up, and all of a sudden there's a man standing there, and I mean as real as anybody, like very solid. And I go up, and he's asking me, "How are you doing, honey? Are you having fun playing? You being good?" That kind of stuff. And I kept kind of looking at his hands because he had his hands like kind of like this, but I could notice that the fingers were missing. And he looked back up and he goes, "Don't worry, honey, they don't hurt you." He's like, "You go along and play and be good." And so the 2 seconds that it took me to walk and sit down and face that direction again, he was already gone. And it wasn't for years later that I actually got confirmation from my mom that my great grandfather had indeed already been passed away before I never met him. Well, I did, but in spirit. But through reading different types of books, I've always loved Edgar Allan Poe, um, TV shows, movies. I love horror films, TV shows such as Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, The Holster Files, all that. And just over time, just developed a interest in it and trying to capture different things, whether it's through an EVP or through different devices, but trying to find out what happens after we die.
Right? Which you brought up a valid point in that when you said you looked at his fingers and then he said, "Don't worry, they don't hurt anymore." So, how we get into our investigations and stuff, some of the commonly asked questions are, do you feel the pain that you endured when you're alive, right?
Yeah.
So when you looked at his hands and it said, "Don't worry, they don't hurt anymore,"
There you go.
there's some validation right there.
Mm.
So that's kind of really cool. Like, that's like the coolest experience that I've heard in a long time. Because, like, the fact that you looked up at your grandfather, your great great grandfather, or
So it was my mother's grandfather, so my great grandfather.
okay. So, and the fact that you look this way and then you look back and he's gone. Like, that's just how quickly they can appear and disappear. To me,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. So, all right, guys. So now we're going to get into our history of TALA, aka Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. May you do me the honors and go ahead, Miss Anime Ghost Girl.
I will. All right. So the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is located in Weston, West Virginia. And in 1858, the government of Virginia was in dire need of a third mental institution to relieve overcrowding at the Williamsburg and Stanton facilities. They were highly inadequate, so a new asylum was to be established in the outer reaches of the state, west of the Allegheny mountain chain, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. So for those of you that are not familiar, West Virginia at this time actually did not exist. It was still part of Virginia, and I will get into that in a few minutes.
Can I say something
So,
real quick?
of course.
Now, you said you went to Beckley, West Virginia.
Yes, my mother was born in Beckley, West Virginia.
And now you have a fascination for a loony bin in
West Virginia.
There you go.
So Virginia purchased 269 acres for just under $100,000, which in today's currency would be about $3,900,000.
That's insane.
It is. On the banks of the West Fork of the Mongolia River, a stone's throw from downtown Weston. Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride, considered the foremost authority in asylum construction, was hired as an advisor, and during the early construction, he would go to Weston several times to personally inspect and monitor the progress of this state-of-the-art facility, which would provide private quarters for 250 patients. And I want you all to remember that. 250 patients. That's all this asylum was designed for. Richard Snowden Andrews was hired as the architect, and the asylum would prove to be his masterpiece. So Snowden drew up architectural plans of monumental proportions, and ground was broken at the southern end of the property in the fall of 1858, with an estimated cost of $400,000, which today that's $15 million in today's currency.
Jesus.
I know. Inflation, you know?
You know?
They used an excellent quality of blue sandstone, indigenous to the area. This soft rock is very easy to work with, only requiring a hammer and chisel. And the asylum is actually the largest hand-cut blue sandstone building in America. On the 30th of June, 1861, the citizens of Weston were awoken from their sleep by the sounds of drum and marching soldiers. War had come to Weston. The asylum and the town of Weston, then still part of Virginia, were not spared, and the events that took place, although generally unknown, played a key role in remodeling the United States. And in 1863, the new state of Virginia became West Virginia. And the asylum had officially opened in 1864. 9 patients were brought in from Ohio, and shortly afterwards, another 20 from Williamsburg and Stanton were transferred to Weston. Sadly, the very first thing that they needed to build aside from the asylum was the construction of a simple stone blockhouse that would serve as the morgue. And in the early days, the bodies would be stored on shelves during the winter. The original morgue was never empty and remains standing today. By the winter of 1866, there was now a total of 45 patients. And at that time, the youngest patient was an 8-year-old, and the oldest was 93. By 1868, even though construction continued, there's now 200 patients. No one could have ever seen how quickly the asylum would grow. And in 1881, the construction was complete. The asylum was nearly a quarter-mile long and had 10 acres of floor space. The 200-foot clock tower crowned the center section. The castle-like structure had nearly 1,000 windows to bring sunlight and fresh air in, but they were fitted with iron bars to keep the patients from getting out. By now, there were 700 patients, nearly triple the number prescribed by Dr. Kirkbride. And for just a second, I'm going to talk about the different times here and how many people ended up in this facility. By 1938, there was 1,661 patients. By 1949, 1,800 patients. And by the 1950s, 2,600 patients.
Isn't that amazing how something that's built for a certain amount of people turns into overcrowding?
It's sad because a lot of these couldn't be taken care of the way they needed to be.
And, and it's crazy because we actually have a huge problem with mental health today.
We do, because it's still slightly misunderstood, or what causes this or what causes that, and trying to diagnose all that stuff.
Right. Because we have it's crazy because it's like, all these people are on the streets, like either, I don't even, I'm trying to be very cautious with my words. Like have like no clue where they're at because they're so strung out on whatever they're strung out on. And it causes them to do crazy things. Like, like a couple of years ago, I was actually working one day and I literally saw a woman punching air and yelling at air because it's like, you don't know what these people can see because we all see life in different perspectives, right? So it's like, you don't know what's in front of that person that they can see, but we can't. Hence, again, why we're basically talking about this is because AKA paranormal, not normal. You know what I'm saying? Things that are not normal to the world, but when we see things as, spiritual and beings, it's normal to us.
Yes.
And it's just, I just wanted to put that out there because it's like, mental health is a huge, huge problem in this world. And there are not enough facilities for people and not enough doctors to fully understand what's going on in someone's brain. Like, because that's basically what this is, mental asylum, right? So you've got these doctors that are just doing this to get paid now, just for the money. And it's sad.
It's completely sad. I myself, someone who suffers from mental disorders, depression and anxiety, and I also have attention deficit disorder. Yeah. I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones. It's not the most terrible, but the ones who suffer from other issues, it's just a shame that sometimes they can't even get the help.
Right. Because of overcrowding on, the severe cases, as they say, severe cases, right? In the severe cases, so they can drain families dry of financial things. And it's like, so you got Joe Smo over here that has huge mental issues. And then you got Mary Jane Smith over here that's just slightly got some issues, but they would rather treat Mary Jane Smith because she's an easier problem to deal with rather than Joe Smo over here, who's a hard case that needs to be diagnosed and figure out what's going on. And he's just shoved to the side.
Correct.
And to me, that's basically crazy how things work in today's society and back then as well. Sorry.
No, you're good. The mental conditions of those admitted to the asylum from its opening in 1864 until it was completed in 1881 bordered on the bizarre. The most common was chronic mania, an all-inclusive diagnosis, meaning that it was not known what was wrong with these people or why, but it was necessary that they be removed from society. Many people were traumatized by the events of the Civil War. Opiate addiction was a big cause of admission, as well as many other things. The treatments for mental disorder in the late 1800s was downright barbaric. Doctors would turn to physical restraints, such as having a patient's hands tied or locked in metal mittens. They would be placed in straitjackets or placed in a Utica crib. So if you all have not ever heard or don't understand what a Utica crib is, I'm about to describe that for you. It is a horrible device that was unfortunately used in institutions in this era. The Utica crib is a bed structured like a crib with slated sides. At 6 feet long and 3 feet wide, it was covered with a lid which shut with a spring lock. The space between the body and the lid was barely 12 inches, making it no different than a coffin. Attendants were expected to keep patients under control at all times, so confinement cribs, chair cages, and isolation cells were an unfortunate necessity at the asylum until the day it was closed. By 1901, the asylum had over 1,000 patients. By the early 20th century, hydrotherapy was introduced in 1933, Then insulin shock therapy was introduced and used extensively until the 1950s. In 1940, electroshock therapy was introduced and was a way to induce convulsions, much like the previously used insulin. The worst procedure of all was the leucotomy, which involved using what was basically an ice pick to penetrate the skull directly through the eye socket in order to cut the neuroconnectors to the frontal lobe of the brain. And the theory behind that procedure was by eliminating these connections, the brain would not experience the aggressive and potentially dangerous emotional reactions. Dr. Walter Freeman studied this procedure, which was invented by a Portuguese neurosurgeon, Egas Moniz, in 1934. And Freeman wanted to become the first doctor to perform a leucotomy in America. By the way, this dude is a terrible person. I just want to go out there and say that.
He had the name lobotomizer on his license plate.
Terrible. And I mean, it wasn't just in this facility. He was all over. He spent only a few years in Trans-Allegheny. So in 1948, he started working at the asylum. And astonishingly, by 1952, he had performed 787 lobotomies, including an astonishing 225 in 12 days. He could now reduce an adult brain to a childlike state in less than 10 minutes. Luckily, the ice pick era ended in the late 1950s thanks to the development of psychotropic drugs. Freeman had many failed procedures, and yet he kept going. But none was more noticeable than Rosemary Kennedy. Yes, the sister of John F. Kennedy. At the age of 23, she was lobotomized, and the results were such a disaster that she spent the rest of her life in a mental institution. As new psychiatric methods and developments in pharmaceuticals took hold, the population of the institutions had begun to decline nationwide. And by 1990, there was only a few hundred inmates at the asylum, mostly there for drug and alcohol abuse. The asylum era was over, and in 1994, the asylum closed its doors. But today, you can visit the asylum and explore the seemingly endless and eerie hallways while gaining an understanding of what really happened within the walls of this Gothic castle for the mentally ill.
And it's a beautiful building. Like, it is really, and it is sad something that beautiful housed something that chaotic.
And the horrors that happened behind the walls.
Yeah, really. Like, you know, and it's crazy because the walls do talk. You know, you just have to sit in silence and listen, you know. But, you know, when you investigate, as you always say, you have to do
your history. You have to understand the history of the location in order to understand why it's haunted.
Or else, and in some cases, people just think the buildings just appear out of nowhere. Oh, look, there's a building and it's haunted. Now, to all, now Miss Anime Ghost Girl, she actually has done the day tour. And I have done the paranormal investigation and the day tour. So the day tours vary in prices. And then the investigations also vary in prices as well. To do the investigation, it's a public event. And I think it's like $170 something a person or $111 or something. I don't remember. It's on it's on their website, but it is a public event. And you get basically divided up in 4 groups. And then when you do the investigation, they have you each on each floor. They give you 90 minutes and then they switch you on each floor. You get 90 minutes on that floor and then you get to investigate. The only thing about that is I'm not one for public investigations because of noise contamination, and people do not have respect for other investigators. For personal experiences at this location, just people don't respect personal, you know, they don't expect when you investigate, you know, because they're burping or coughing or being loud or just it's. If you want to investigate, pay the money, because I think a private investigation is like what, $2,500 to $1,500. Get a private group of 10 to 15. And these buildings are huge because you get, like, in some cases you get the main building, you get the geriatrics building and the main building, and then there's the violent ward, you know? So you can get all three buildings or you can pick and choose, but I recommend private event only because it's less noise contamination, you know, being paranormal investigator that does investigations all the time. Now, your experiences at Allegheny, what was that like?
So, as you said, I did a daytime tour of actually Discovery Asylum. It was myself, my daughter, and a friend of mine. And we were in the main building, and I was just taking the first one that I noticed. We were taking a bunch of pictures, and I believe it was a picture. It was down like the hallway. It looked like it might have been into like the kitchen area or something, but on the one side of the glass. And I always take 3 pictures right in a row because it's good to, you can look at them and see if you've captured anything. You're like, well, if it's not in these 2 pictures, but there's something interesting in this, that kind of gives you a little bit more of a like, okay, what's going on here? But in that window, it looked like the face of what I would say a female patient who had on a white gown, like looking out of that window.
All right, guys, so this is a picture that she had sent me. Now, I didn't see anything in the window, but I did see this. When I changed the contrast, this is what actually showed itself to me. There is a woman standing there with a head and a dress. So, good capture.
So I thought that was quite strange. The next thing that actually happened to me is we were on the 4th floor because this particular tour, if I remember correctly, had 40 people, and we were split into 2 groups. And so the one lady that we had mainly did the main building, and we were on the 4th floor, and I'm walking, and all of a sudden, like, it feels like somebody literally comes up behind me, rushes past me, and hits my elbow, like, to where I literally was like, what? My first thought is I turned to my daughter, and I'm like, why'd you bump into me? And she's like, Mom, I'm over here. And she actually was. She was not anywhere near me. So then I thought, okay, well, maybe somebody was standing close behind me, bumped me on accident. No, no one was close to me in any way that they could have touched me like that. It was almost like, to me, like I would have think about it as like the patient wanted to get up to the front of the line. Yes, so like, hey,
And she was like, move, bitch.
That's what it was like. It was like somebody just pushed past me. Interesting.
Right? Like, okay, that did happen. I'm not making this up. Okay.
Yeah. And trust me, didn't debunk it. I'm like, no, there had to be. But there was nothing. My daughter, again, over here with at least 5 feet away from me, and the other people were at least 6 feet back because this was in 2021, so we still had to wear masks and be like the social distance. So yeah, there was nobody.
Yeah. So what could it be, right? Because 2021 social distancing. Yeah, that was something else. So then it's funny you say that because I think in 2022 I went to Allegheny, and I did the violent ward. I did the one that's behind the main building. Now I got a story for you. So in 2016, we actually did the overnight investigation, and so there was like a cafeteria on where they do the like they also do a haunted house type thing where you actually can walk through like a haunted house, like Waverly does. And at this time,
awesome. That would be awesome.
Yeah, they have that. They actually do that. And the building that we went to, it actually had, I think we sat in like the cafeteria or something, but we were in the part where it's no longer there. So 2016, we're in the cafeteria doing our little the ghost box or oh my god, the one where it does the white noise and it's like just saying random words. It wasn't the SB7, it was another thing that they were using before the SB7 came out. And it was but it was on a speaker, and we were hearing noises and things like that. And then we're on the 4th floor, and the tour guide is like walking down the hallway. Now on the wall, it's like directly underneath the window, which is like right here, right? So the tour guide finally gets to the end of the hall, and we actually see something past the light. And we're all like, yo, where are you at? And she goes, oh, I'm already at the end of the hall. And we're like, what just walked through the light? Because we thought that was you. And she's like, nope, I'm at the end of the hall. But here's another thing. So we go back in 2022, and I do the day tour. And I actually walk through with our tour guide. He brings us through the morgue, which the coffins back then looked wild. Let me tell you, they looked wild. The
Yes,
morgue.
I actually have a picture of that coffin.
So do I. Oh my gosh. So we're doing the day tour, and when we're going towards the violent ward area, there's a ramp that you walk up to get upstairs. So I stop in my tracks because something wouldn't let me go upstairs. Something literally stopped me on that ramp. And the tour guide and, the people that I were with, they were like, what's going on? And I'm like, something doesn't want me to go up there. I can't move. I'm stuck.
It's funny that you said that something wouldn't let you move. I don't quite remember the building that we were in. I don't remember if it's still the main building. We were in one of the buildings because, like I said, you can tour the other buildings. The other buildings, such as the geriatric, the women's ward, the medical building, they're in the back of that the main building. But as I say, I always take 3 pictures. Always. Something said, no, you're not. My phone, literally, the camera malfunctioned. I could not take a photo.
Don't you love it? Don't you love it when paranormal does that?
Take a photo. I said, okay, I'll leave. And I knew. And I said, okay, you don't want your picture taken. I respect that.
Exactly. So we're going down this, we're finally, doing the tour and getting, information of what's going on. And I did think it was the medical building because it was the one that was behind the building, right? Yes. So we're outside, and I'm looking outside, and I'm like, this building looks different. I'm like, this building doesn't look the same. I was like, what did you guys do to this building? And they said, oh, well, the back part of the building started leaning in to the main building, so we had to have it removed. And I was like, oh my God. I literally was in that part before they removed it, which was the cafeteria.
Yes.
So I was like, oh my God. I was like, that's why it looked so different, because they actually had to move a piece of the structure. Like, it was a whole section they had to remove because it was leaning in to the building, because the building is getting so old. And that's another thing I do want to let people know, is that when you actually do pay for an investigation, whether it be a day tour, an investigation, a public investigation, all proceedings do go into restoring the building.
Absolutely they do. So, and that's why I will say that Discover the Asylum, was a bit pricey. I mean, it was, but it wasn't, because I was paying for 3 different people. But I'll never forget that experience as long as I live. It was a great experience to be able to get to go. And I hope soon that I do get to go back, because the next time I go back, it's either going to be a flashlight tour or the ghost hunt.
Do the ghost hunt. We should so do the ghost hunt. We really should. This time it'll be you, me, the hubby, or just, why don't you and I do something like that? Just you and me. Bro. Let's go. But other than that, now I have some EVPs that I'm also going to put these at the end of the video. Hi, kitty. Hi, kitty. Yeah.
She said she wanted to be in the video too.
You know what? I'm not mad. That's awesome. Okay, so we're gonna play this, and I want you guys to hear this. Medication did you falsely diagnose? How many patients did you falsely diagnose? How many patients did you falsely diagnose? Now, in that moment, I was in an office and I was a little aggravated for the simple fact that I live out here. So when I go somewhere, I live in Las Vegas now. When I go somewhere, paranormal is normal to me. So like when I go to a location, paranormal does what it wants. And then I go to the East Coast and I go to the asylum and it's really quiet. And through time, I've learned that if the building's quiet, it's an EVP night. And if your equipment's not going off, it's an EVP night. And if it can be so many different nights with the paranormal, because like I said, paranormal does what it wants, as I always say. I was asking, why did they falsely diagnose patients? Because I felt that was the best way to get a response. I wasn't trying to irritate a spirit. I was just trying to ask questions the best way I could to get a response. And I said, why did you falsely diagnose patients? Because in some cases they did in order to get the family's money, right? A spirit told me to get out of here now. So now when we did the investigation, we also did, we met this couple and we were just sitting on the floor, just chilling. And while we were sitting on the floor, we heard this random bang, like just a random bang. And we're all looking around like, what the hell was that, right? So I'm going to play that for you guys. Oh my God. All right, hold on. I got to redo that. Okay, here we go. Do you not want us in here? Do you not want us in here? The fuck was that? What was that? I'm not sure. Do you not want us in here? The fuck was that? What was that? I'm not sure. Now that was a direct response. This was back in, I think, 2022, before I really started to understand, the paranormal. When they do stuff like that, after you ask a question, that's a direct response. Like, yeah, I don't want you in here. Get out. And they banged something because all of us looked around. We're like, what was that? Nobody knew. And after, we all were going towards different floors, everyone asked, did you guys hear that bang? Did you hear that bang? And we're all like, yeah, where'd it come from? Nobody knew where it would come from because we even asked the tour guides, did you guys shut a door? No.
Oh.
So with that being said, that was some crazy stuff. And I have other EVPs, which again, I'll put at towards the end of the video. So you guys as our viewers can hear and see what we got. So
one thing I remember you telling me about the first tour you did in 2016 was that siren going off.
Yes. Dude, I totally forgot about that. So we're sitting here doing the investigation. I'm gonna put it to you like this. We're in the middle of we're in, I think, Emily's room. And all of a sudden we hear the Silent Hill siren, right? And I'm like, and they mention it in the tour, they mention it in the description of what you expect throughout the night. They're at 10 p.m. You're going to hear the curfew siren. And we're like, oh, okay, whatever. And none of us were really paying attention. So we're just chilling. And all of a sudden you hear, and we're just like, what the hell? And I'm like, that's some Silent Hill shit. Oh my God. Yeah. Totally forgot about that.
So, yeah, I remember you telling me about it. And I had to laugh because, yeah, I've heard that. And it really does. It sounds like the siren from Silent Hill.
It
Yeah,
really
or
does. I wonder if that's where they got it from.
they could. They've probably an old, like, it also kind of almost reminds me of an old, like when you hear like an air raid about to happen back in like World War II. That,
Mm-hmm.
or, it's that same siren. So, yes. Woo, spooky.
That's really, really spooky. So guys, I hope you enjoyed our history buff on Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Next week, join us as we talk about the brothels of the Ladies of the Night in Nevada.
Ooh.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Chaos? Why is it so quiet? Was that our chaos? I mean, was that our paranormal evidence that we got?